Poor black woman was abandoned by family, but a billionaire CEO rescued her and changed her life. The bus wheezed to a stop at the corner of 5th and Nowhere, its doors hissing open like a mechanical sigh. Jasmine Holloway clutched her black trash bag closer to her chest, the plastic crinkling against her worn jacket. Everything she owned in the world was in that bag: 3 changes of clothes, a photo of her grandmother, and a half-eaten granola bar that would have to serve as dinner. 26 years old, and this was what her life had become. The bus driver glanced at her through his rearview mirror, his eyes holding that particular mix of pity and impatience that Jasmine had grown to recognize. She was the last passenger again, riding the night route in circles because she had nowhere else to go. This was her 3rd night doing this dance, paying the $2.50 fare just to have a warm place to sit until morning. "End of the line, miss," the driver called out, his voice not unkind but firm. "Gotta take a 20-minute break before the next loop." Jasmine nodded and stepped off into the bitter February air. The bus stop was nothing more than a metal bench under a flickering streetlight, surrounded by empty lots and closed storefronts. The kind of place where the city seemed to forget itself existed. She settled onto the cold bench, pulling her jacket tighter and trying not to think about how different her life had been just 3 months ago. 3 months ago, she'd had an apartment with her name on the lease. A job at Henderson Financial where she'd worked her way up from receptionist to junior analyst. A family that called her for Sunday dinners and birthday celebrations. All of it gone now, swept away by one terrible choice, the choice to do the right thing. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number, probably another debt collector. She let it go to voicemail, just like she had with the 17 calls before it. There was no point answering. She couldn't pay what she owed, and explaining the situation only made her sound crazy. "My brother Marcus embezzled $2 million from his company, and when they came looking for answers, my family decided I should take the blame because I worked in finance too. When I refused, they cut me off completely and somehow managed to destroy my reputation in the process." Yeah, that story went over real well with potential employers. The streetlight above her head gave another flicker, and for a moment, Jasmine was plunged into near darkness. In that brief shadow, she saw her reflection in the window of the closed barbershop across the street, a young woman who looked older than her years, worn down by circumstances she never could have imagined. She unwrapped the granola bar and broke it in half, saving one piece for later. The oats were stale, but it was food, and food was something she couldn't take for granted anymore. As she chewed, she noticed someone approaching from down the street. A man in dark jeans and a gray hoodie walked toward the bus stop, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Jasmine tensed slightly. Being alone at night had taught her to be cautious, but there was something about his posture that seemed non-threatening. He moved slowly, almost carefully, like someone who didn't want to startle her. He took a seat on the far end of the bench, leaving plenty of space between them. For several minutes, they sat in comfortable silence, 2 strangers sharing the solitude of the night. The man pulled out a wrap sandwich from his jacket pocket and unwrapped it carefully. Turkey and cheese on wheat bread, it looked like something from an expensive deli, not a gas station. "Rough night?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying a warmth that Jasmine hadn't heard directed at her in weeks. She glanced at him sideways. He was probably in his early 30s, with dark hair peeking out from under his hood and kind eyes that didn't judge. There was something about him that felt safe, though she couldn't put her finger on what it was. "Rough few months," she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. He nodded as if he understood, then did something unexpected. He tore his sandwich in half and offered her the larger piece. "Looks like you could use this more than me." Jasmine stared at the offering, emotions welling up in her throat. When was the last time someone had shown her simple kindness without wanting something in return? "I can't take your food." "Please," he said gently. "I've got more at home. You'd be doing me a favor, I always buy too much." She accepted the sandwich with shaking hands, not trusting herself to speak without crying. The first bite was heaven, real turkey, fresh bread, crisp lettuce. It tasted like hope. "What's your name?" he asked after a while. "Jasmine," she said, then immediately wondered if she should have lied. But something about him made deception feel unnecessary. "That's a beautiful name," he said simply. They sat together as she ate, the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. He didn't ask why she was sitting at a bus stop at midnight with everything she owned in a trash bag. He didn't probe or pry or offer unsolicited advice. He just sat with her, a quiet presence in the darkness. "Can I ask you something?" Jasmine said as she finished the sandwich. "Why did you help me? You don't even know me." The man was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "Sometimes we meet people at exactly the moment when we need to," he said finally. "Maybe I needed to remember what kindness looks like just as much as you needed to receive it." The bus rounded the corner, its headlights cutting through the night. As it approached their stop, the man stood and adjusted his hood. "Take care of yourself, Jasmine," he said, and there was something in the way he said her name that made her think he wouldn't forget it. "Wait," she called as he started to walk away. "What's your name?" He paused, turned back with a small smile that seemed both sad and hopeful. "Just someone who believes things can get better." And then he disappeared into the shadows between streetlights, leaving Jasmine alone with the lingering taste of kindness and the strangest feeling that this encounter would somehow change everything. The Mercy House Women's Shelter smelled like industrial disinfectant and second chances. Jasmine signed the intake form with a name that wasn't quite hers, Jamie Holland, because the last thing she needed was her family tracking her down to finish what they'd started. The social worker, a tired woman named Mrs. Chin, handed her a key attached to a piece of orange yarn. "Bed 12 in room 4, Mrs. Chin said without looking up from her paperwork. "Lights out at 10, breakfast at 6. No drugs, no alcohol, no men past the lobby. You break the rules, you're out. Understood?" Jasmine nodded and made her way down the narrow hallway, past rooms filled with women whose stories she'd never hear but whose eyes she recognized. The same look of defeat mixed with stubborn hope that she saw in her own reflection these days. Room 4 housed 8 women in 4 bunk beds. Her assigned bed was a top bunk near the window, which would have been perfect if the window hadn't been painted shut and covered with security bars. She climbed up and arranged her few belongings in the small metal locker beside her pillow. The woman in the bunk below her was reading a romance novel with a shirtless man on the cover. She looked up as Jasmine settled in. "First time?" the woman asked. She was maybe 40, with graying roots showing through her auburn hair and intelligent brown eyes. "That obvious?" Jasmine replied. "You still have hope in your posture," the woman said with a wry smile. "Give it a week. I'm Diana, by the way. Been here 2 months. Jamie," Jasmine said, the fake name feeling strange on her tongue. "What's your story?" Diana closed her book and sat up. "Husband drained our accounts and disappeared to Costa Rica with his secretary. Left me with 3 kids and a mountain of debt I didn't know existed." "You?" Jasmine had prepared for this question, but the simple truth seemed safest. "Family betrayal. Lost everything standing up for what was right." Diana nodded knowingly. "The worst kind of poor, moral poor. Rich people never understand that some things can't be bought." Over the following days, Jasmine fell into the rhythm of shelter life. She spent mornings at the community college library, using their free internet to search for jobs. Every application felt like shouting into the void. Her references from Henderson Financial had been mysteriously replaced with a single line. "Employment terminated for cause. No rehire." Marcus had been thorough in his destruction. But Jasmine refused to stay idle. She noticed that many of the women at the shelter struggled with basic computer skills, so she started offering help during the evening hours. She showed Maria how to create an email account, helped Denise write a resume for a cleaning job, and taught 3 different women how to fill out online applications. Word spread quickly through the shelter's informal network. Soon, Jasmine had a regular group of women who gathered around the single computer in the common room every evening, learning skills that might help them climb out of their circumstances. Mrs. Chin noticed the change in the common room's atmosphere. "You're doing good work here, Jamie," she said one evening, watching Jasmine explain the importance of tailoring a resume to each job application. Ever think about social work? Jasmine shrugged. Can't afford school, and who'd hire someone living in a shelter? But the question stayed with her. She never felt more useful than she did in those evening sessions, helping women who reminded her of herself, smart, capable people that life had knocked down but not out. Meanwhile, across the city in a gleaming downtown high-rise, Logan Ross sat in his corner office staring at a wall of security monitors. His head of security, a former FBI agent named Patricia Wells, stood beside his desk holding a tablet full of disappointing reports. "Sir, we've checked every shelter, every women's resource center, every temporary housing facility within a 50-mile radius," Patricia said. "No Jasmine Holloway. Are you sure about the name?" Logan spun his chair to face the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the bus stop, and he couldn't shake the memory of the woman who'd sat beside him with such quiet dignity. There had been something about her, a strength that poverty and abandonment hadn't managed to break. "She might be using a different name," he said quietly. "Expand the search. Check and take records under variations. J. Holloway J. Smith, anything close?" Patricia raised an eyebrow but didn't question her boss's unusual request. In 5 years of working for Logan Ross, she'd never seen him personally involved in anything that didn't directly relate to Rosteca's business interests. This sudden humanitarian streak was puzzling, but the man paid her well enough to follow orders without explanation. "What exactly do you want to do when we find her, sir?" Logan was quiet for a long moment, watching the evening traffic flow through the streets below like blood through arteries. Somewhere down there, Jasmine was probably wondering where her next meal would come from, while he sat in an office that cost more per month than most people made in a year. "I want to give her a chance," he said finally. "The kind of chance someone gave me once, when I needed it most." Back at Mercy House, Jasmine was helping a young mother named Sarah practice for a job interview when Diana approached with something unusual, excitement on her face. "Jamie, you need to see this," Diana said, holding up a piece of paper. "Someone left this at the front desk asking for you specifically. Mrs. Chen said a courier dropped it off an hour ago." Jasmine took the envelope with trembling hands. Her fake name was written on the front in elegant script, but there was no return address, no company logo, nothing to indicate where it had come from. Inside was a single sheet of expensive paper with a date, time, and address. Nothing else. "Job interview?" Sarah asked hopefully. Jasmine stared at the mysterious invitation, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't explain. The address was downtown, in the business district she'd once worked in but now avoided like a painful memory. "Maybe," she said softly, but something told her this was about to become much more complicated than a simple job interview. The Rostec building stretched 40 stories into the Seattle sky, its glass facade reflecting clouds that Jasmine couldn't afford to daydream about anymore. She stood on the sidewalk clutching the mysterious letter, wearing the one professional outfit she'd managed to save, a navy blazer with a small stain on the sleeve that she'd covered with a strategically placed pin. This had to be a mistake. The address on the letter matched the towering corporate headquarters in front of her, but Jasmine couldn't imagine why anyone from Rostec would want to see her. She never applied for a position here, never had any connection to the tech giant that dominated Seattle's business landscape. Maybe it was some kind of job fair she'd forgotten about. Or a group interview for entry-level positions. That had to be it. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and steel, with water features that cost more than most people's cars. Jasmine approached the security desk, feeling every bit the imposter in her thrift store heels. "I have an appointment," she said, showing the letter to the guard. "Though I'm not sure with whom." The guard, a professional woman in her 50s, scanned the letter and typed something into her computer. Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Ms. Holland? You're expected on the 38th floor. Executive elevator bank is to your right." Jasmine's stomach dropped. Executive floor? This was definitely a mistake. She was about to explain the confusion when the guard handed her a visitor's badge with her fake name already printed on it. The elevator ride felt like ascending into another dimension. By the 28th floor, her ears were popping. By the 35th, she was questioning every decision that had led her to this moment. When the doors opened on 38, she stepped into a world of understated luxury that made the lobby look modest. A woman in an impeccable gray suit greeted her immediately. "Ms. Holland? I'm Margaret Chen, Mr. Ross's executive assistant. He's waiting for you in his office." Mr. Ross. Jasmine's mind raced through every Ross she'd ever known, but came up empty. The assistant led her down a hallway lined with awards and photographs of Ross Tech's charitable initiatives, computer labs and underserved schools, job training programs, scholarships for disadvantaged youth. They stopped at a set of double doors that probably cost more than Jasmine's former apartment. Margaret knocked once and opened them without waiting for a response. "Mr. Ross? Ms. Holland is here." The office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the entire city. But Jasmine barely noticed the view because her attention was fixed on the man rising from behind the massive desk. It was him. The stranger from the bus stop. But not exactly. Gone was the gray hoodie and casual demeanor. This version wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. His dark hair was styled, his jaw clean-shaven, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. "Hello, Jasmine," he said, and his voice was the same warm tone she remembered from that cold night. "Thank you for coming." Jasmine's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the back of a leather chair to steady herself. What is this?" Logan Ross. Because it had to be Logan Ross, the billionaire CEO whose face graced magazine covers and business journals, gestured to the chair she was already holding onto. "Please sit. I know this must be confusing." "Confusing?" Jasmine's voice cracked. "I thought you were just some guy who felt sorry for me. You're Logan Ross. You run this whole company. You could buy and sell small countries." He moved around his desk to sit in the chair across from her, maintaining the same careful distance he'd kept on the bench that night. "I'm still the same person who shared his sandwich with you." "Why?" The word came out strangled. "Why were you on that bus route? Why were you dressed like a normal person?" Logan was quiet for a moment, his gaze shifting to the windows. "Sometimes I take walks through different parts of the city late at night. It helps me think, helps me remember what the real world looks like outside of boardrooms and profit margins. That night, I'd been walking for hours and decided to take the bus back downtown. And you just happened to sit next to the one homeless woman in Seattle?" "No," he said, meeting her eyes again. "I sat next to a woman who was clearly going through the worst time of her life but still had dignity. Who said integrity cost her everything but didn't seem to regret it. That's not something you see every day, in my line of work or any other." Jasmine felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. "So what is this? Some kind of charity case? Are you running for mayor and need a feel-good story?" Logan leaned forward slightly. "I've been looking for you for 3 weeks, Jasmine. My security team has been checking every shelter, every resource center, every place someone in your situation might go. Do you know how hard you are to find when you don't want to be found? You've been stalking me?" "I've been trying to find you," he corrected gently. "Because that night, you told me something that's been keeping me awake. You said integrity costs you everything. I want to know your story. The real story." Jasmine stared at him, this impossible man who'd somehow tracked her down across a city of millions. "Why does it matter?" "Because," Logan said, his voice carrying a weight she didn't understand. "I think you might be exactly what my company needs. What I need." He stood and walked to his desk, returning with a folder. "I'm offering you something, Jasmine. A consulting position. 1 month, full pay, housing provided. A chance to tell me how someone with your principles would handle the ethical challenges facing a company like Ross Tech." Jasmine opened the folder with shaking hands. The salary figure made her dizzy. "This is impossible. I don't have any credentials. I'm living in a homeless shelter under a fake name. You have something more valuable than credentials, Logan said. You have integrity that can't be bought, broken, or compromised. In my world, that's rarer than any degree. She looked up at him, this stranger who'd somehow seen something in her that her own family had missed. What if I'm not what you think I am? What if I disappoint you? Logan smiled, and for a moment, he looked exactly like the kind man who'd offered her half his sandwich. Then we'll figure it out together. What do you say, Jasmine? Ready to change your life? Outside the windows, the city spread out like a map of possibilities. Jasmine thought about Diana and Sarah and all the women back at the shelter who were still fighting for their second chances. Maybe it was time to stop running from hers. Okay, she whispered. Let's do this. The guest cottage sat on the edge of Rosteka's sprawling campus like a fairy tale hiding in plain sight. Complete with a full kitchen, spacious bedroom, and a view of the company's meditation gardens, it was more luxury than Jasmine had experienced in her entire life. She set her trash bag down on the hardwood floor and immediately felt like an imposter. Her first day started with Margaret delivering a laptop, security badge, and a manila folder marked Project Sanctuary. Inside were documents about corporate whistleblower protection, ethical AI development, and something called moral injury in the workplace. The parallels to her own experience were impossible to ignore. Coincidence? She murmured, settling at the small desk by the window. But as she dove deeper into the materials, coincidence seemed less and less likely. The case studies read like a carefully anonymized version of her own story: family betrayal, corporate fraud, personal sacrifice for ethical stands. Someone had written her life into a business proposal, changing names and details but keeping the emotional core intact. Her hands trembled as she read a section titled, "The Psychology of Ethical Choice in Hostile Environments." It described someone who chose integrity over security, truth over family loyalty. Someone exactly like her. Logan was testing her. But for what? A knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an expensive haircut stood on the porch, holding 2 coffee cups. "You must be our mysterious consultant," the woman said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Victoria Brennan, Senior VP of Strategic Development. Mind if I come in?" Jasmine gestured her inside, accepting the coffee gratefully. Victoria settled into the armchair across from her with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to asserting dominance in any space. "So," Victoria said, stirring sugar into her coffee, "Logan's pet project. How did you two meet?" The question felt loaded. "Through mutual circumstances," Jasmine said carefully. Victoria laughed, but it wasn't particularly friendly. "Mutual circumstances. How diplomatic. Well, I suppose we all have our ways of catching the boss's attention. I just hope you're prepared for what working here actually entails." "What do you mean?" "Logan has enthusiasms," Victoria said, waving her hand dismissively. "Last year it was sustainable packaging. Before that, workplace meditation programs. He gets passionate about causes, throws money at them, then moves on when something shinier catches his eye. The trick is to make your mark before the novelty wears off." Jasmine felt something cold settle in her stomach. "And you think I'm just another novelty?" "Honey, I think you're a homeless woman who got very lucky," Victoria said, her mask of politeness finally slipping. "But luck runs out. The question is what you plan to do with yours." After Victoria left, Jasmine sat in the sudden quiet, her confidence shaken. Was this really just another of Logan's charitable whims? Was she being naive to think this opportunity was real? Her first team meeting the next morning didn't help her doubts. She walked into a conference room full of executives in $1,000 suits who looked at her like she'd wandered in from the street, which, technically, she had. Victoria introduced her with barely concealed condescension. "Everyone, meet our new consultant on Project Sanctuary. She brings a unique perspective to corporate ethics." The snickers were subtle but unmistakable. For 2 hours, Jasmine listened to presentations full of buzzwords and empty promises. Token diversity initiatives that wouldn't help anyone. Whistleblower protection policies with more loopholes than safeguards. Corporate social responsibility programs designed to generate good PR rather than actual change. Finally, she couldn't stay quiet anymore. "This won't work," she said during a presentation about hiring practices. The room went silent. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Jasmine stood, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "These policies look good on paper, but they won't help the people who actually need protection. You're treating symptoms instead of addressing the disease." "And what disease is that?" asked James Morton, the head of HR, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Fear," Jasmine said simply. "People don't speak up because they're afraid of losing everything. Your policies don't address that fear. They just create more bureaucracy for people to navigate while they're being destroyed." She moved to the whiteboard, her confidence building as she spoke. "You want to protect whistleblowers? Start by creating economic safety nets. Emergency housing, legal funds, job placement guarantees. You want ethical behavior? Stop rewarding people who stay silent about wrongdoing." The room was completely quiet now, but Jasmine could feel the shift in energy. She wasn't just talking theory, she was speaking from experience that none of them could challenge. "Furthermore," she continued, drawing connections on the board, "you restructure the reporting hierarchy. Create independent ethics officers who report directly to the board, not to management. Make retaliation a firing offense with personal liability for executives. And most importantly, you make ethical behavior profitable instead of costly." When she finished, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Then James Morton began to clap slowly, and others joined in. Even Victoria looked grudgingly impressed. "That's..." James paused, consulting his notes. "That's actually brilliant. Revolutionary, but brilliant." What Jasmine didn't know was that Logan was watching the entire presentation through the conference room's live feed, a slight smile playing at his lips. She just passed the test she never knew she was taking. But the real test was yet to come. As the meeting ended and people filed out, Victoria lingered behind. "Not bad," she admitted quietly. "But you should know, Logan's been planning something bigger than Project Sanctuary. Something that involves you specifically." "What do you mean?" Victoria's expression was unreadable. "Ask yourself this: how did he really find you? And why is he so interested in someone with your exact background?" She left Jasmine alone in the conference room with those questions echoing in her mind, and the growing certainty that she was still only seeing part of Logan's plan. Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Seattle, and Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that the real tempest was yet to come. The Ross Tech Auditorium buzzed with anticipation as Seattle's business elite filled the seats. Jasmine stood backstage, her hands trembling as she watched city councilors, tech executives, and journalists take their places. She'd been told this was a small announcement about corporate social responsibility initiatives. This looked like a product launch for the Fortune 500. "5 minutes, Ms. Holland," Margaret said, appearing beside her with a reassuring smile. "You'll do fine." "Margaret," Jasmine said, catching the assistant's arm. "What exactly am I announcing? Logan said I'd be presenting Project Sanctuary, but this feels much bigger." Margaret's expression grew carefully neutral. "Mr. Ross will explain everything. Just follow his lead." The lights dimmed and Logan took the stage to thunderous applause. Watching him command the room with effortless charisma, Jasmine was reminded again of the impossible distance between the man who'd shared his sandwich and the billionaire CEO addressing hundreds of Seattle's most powerful people. "Today marks a turning point for Ross Tech," Logan began, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium. "For too long, corporate America has treated ethical behavior as a luxury, something nice to have when times are good, but expendable when profit margins tighten." Jasmine felt her heart rate spike. This wasn't the presentation they'd rehearsed. "But what if I told you that ethical behavior isn't just morally right, it's profitable? What if I told you that protecting whistleblowers and supporting ethical employees isn't charity, but the smartest business decision you'll ever make?" The audience leaned forward, intrigued. 3 weeks ago, I met someone who proved this theory in the most extraordinary way. Someone who chose integrity over security, truth over family loyalty, moral courage over personal comfort. Someone who lost everything because she refused to compromise her principles. Jasmine's stomach dropped. He was talking about her. In front of everyone. That woman is here today, not as my guest, but as the architect of Rostecca's most ambitious initiative ever. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the founder and director of Project Shelter Code, Jasmine Holloway. The spotlight hit her like a physical blow. Jasmine stood frozen in the wings as applause erupted throughout the auditorium. Project Shelter Code? Founder and director? This wasn't what they'd discussed. Margaret gave her a gentle push, and somehow Jasmine found herself walking onto the stage, Logan's warm smile the only anchor in a sea of staring faces. Jasmine, Logan said, his voice carrying genuine warmth. Would you like to tell them about your vision? Her vision? She looked out at the audience, powerful people who controlled millions of dollars and thousands of jobs, and realized she had two choices: run or own this moment. She chose to own it. 6 months ago, I was a junior analyst at Henderson Financial. She began, her voice stronger than she felt. When I discovered my brother had embezzled $2 million, I faced a choice: let my family make me the scapegoat, or tell the truth and lose everything. The auditorium was completely silent now. I chose the truth. My family disowned me. My career was destroyed. I ended up living in a homeless shelter, surviving on half a granola bar and the kindness of strangers. She glanced at Logan, who nodded encouragingly. But here's what I learned in that shelter, working with women who'd lost everything for standing up to abuse, fraud, and corruption. We are not broken. We are not victims. We are the canaries in the coal mine of corporate America, and instead of protecting us, most companies let us suffocate. The audience was riveted now, some leaning forward in their seats. Project Shelter Code will change that. We're creating a network of economic protection for ethical employees, emergency housing, legal defense funds, job placement guarantees, and most importantly, partnership with companies that value integrity over profit. As she spoke, Jasmine felt something she hadn't experienced in months: power. Not the power of money or position, but the power of truth spoken boldly. Mr. Ross found me at my lowest point and saw potential instead of problems. Today, I'm announcing that 12 major Seattle corporations have already committed to our program. We'll help 500 displaced ethical employees in our first year alone. The applause was deafening, but Jasmine barely heard it. She was staring at the back of the auditorium, where 3 familiar figures had just walked in. Her mother, perfectly coiffed in a designer suit. Her father, looking uncomfortable but determined. And Marcus, her brother, the man whose crimes had started this entire journey. They were smiling and applauding like proud family members, as if they hadn't spent the last 6 months trying to destroy her life. Logan followed her gaze and his expression hardened almost imperceptibly. It seems we have some unexpected guests, he said quietly, only she could hear. As the formal presentation ended and people began to mingle, Jasmine watched her family push through the crowd toward the stage. Her mother reached her first, arms outstretched for an embrace that Jasmine didn't return. "Sweetheart," her mother gushed loudly enough for nearby reporters to hear. "We're so proud of you. We always knew you'd do something amazing." The audacity took Jasmine's breath away. Marcus stepped forward with that same charming smile that had convinced investors to trust him with their money. "Sis, this is incredible. When can we talk about how the family can support your new venture?" For a moment, Jasmine was 26 years old again, desperate for their approval and willing to believe their lies. But then she felt Logan's presence beside her, steady and supportive, and remembered who she'd become in the months since they'd abandoned her. "Support?" she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet around them. "You mean the way you supported me when you tried to make me take the fall for Marcus's embezzlement? Or the way you supported me when you blacklisted me from every financial firm in the city?" Her mother's face flushed, but she maintained her smile. "Honey, there were misunderstandings, but we're family. Family forgives." "You're right," Jasmine said, feeling the weight of every eye in the auditorium. Families should forgive. But first, families should ask for forgiveness. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, her father cleared his throat. Perhaps we could discuss this privately? No, Jasmine said firmly. I'm done with private conversations and family secrets. I'm done pretending that loyalty means covering up crimes. She turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying the authority she'd found in that homeless shelter, helping women who reminded her of herself. The most important thing Project Shelter Code teaches is this: your worth isn't determined by who claims you or who rejects you. It's determined by the choices you make when everything is on the line. The applause that followed was different this time, not polite corporate clapping, but genuine appreciation from people who recognized truth when they heard it. Logan stepped closer to her, his voice low but audible to those nearby. The offer stands, Jasmine. Director of Project Shelter Code, full autonomy, resources to change lives. What do you say? Looking at her family's expectant faces, then at Logan's steady presence, Jasmine realized this was the moment that would define the rest of her life. She had finally found her answer. Yes, Jasmine said, her voice carrying across the now silent auditorium. I accept. The applause erupted again, but this time Jasmine wasn't overwhelmed by it. She stood tall, watching her family's faces cycle through confusion, anger, and finally, a calculating acceptance that told her everything she needed to know about their true intentions. As the crowd began to disperse and reporters clustered around for interviews, her mother made one last attempt. Jasmine, surely you don't mean to shut out your own family? After everything we've been through together? Everything we've been through? Jasmine turned to face her mother fully. You mean when you asked me to lie to federal investigators? When you had Marcus's lawyer call my employers and tell them I was under investigation? When you changed the locks on the family home while I was at the police station telling the truth? Marcus stepped forward, his trademark charm cranked to maximum. Look, Jazz, I made mistakes. Big ones. But I've learned from them. I'm in therapy now, working on myself. This project of yours, it could help people like me too. People who've made bad choices but want to change. Jasmine almost laughed at the audacity. People like you, Marcus? You embezzled $2 million and tried to frame me for it. When that didn't work, you systematically destroyed my reputation to protect yourself. That's not a mistake, that's a pattern of choices. Everyone deserves a second chance, her father said quietly, playing the role of the reasonable patriarch. You're absolutely right, Jasmine agreed. Everyone does deserve a second chance. I got mine from a stranger who saw something worth saving when my own family saw nothing but a convenient scapegoat. She gestured toward Logan, who had been standing quietly nearby, letting her handle the confrontation on her own terms. I learned more about integrity from someone I'd known for 5 minutes than I did from a family I'd known for 26 years. Her mother's composure finally cracked. You ungrateful little Mrs. Holloway. Logan's voice was quiet but carried unmistakable authority. I think it's time for you to leave. Security appeared as if from nowhere, not aggressive, but present enough to make the message clear. Jasmine's family had no choice but to retreat, but not before Marcus made one final play. This won't last, Jazz, he called over his shoulder. Rich guys like him get bored with charity cases. You'll come crawling back. No, Jasmine said with absolute certainty. I won't. As her family disappeared through the exit, Jasmine felt something she hadn't experienced in months: peace. Not the fragile hope she'd been carrying, but genuine peace with her choices and her future. Logan approached her as the last of the crowd filtered out. That couldn't have been easy. It was the easiest thing I've done in months, Jasmine replied. I finally stopped trying to be the daughter they wanted and started being the woman I am. They walked together toward the exit, their footsteps echoing in the now empty auditorium. Outside, Seattle sparkled in the afternoon sun, the earlier storm clouds having passed without delivering their threatened rain. Can I ask you something? Jasmine said as they reached the lobby. That night on the bus, was it really a coincidence? Logan was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. No, he said finally. It wasn't entirely coincidental. Jasmine stopped walking. What do you mean? I'd been following your story in the financial news, Logan admitted. A whistleblower who refused to compromise, even when it cost her everything. I was curious about what kind of person would make that choice. So you stalked me? I was trying to understand you, Logan said. But when I saw you on that bus stop, looking like you'd lost everything but still carrying yourself with dignity, that wasn't research anymore. That was one human being recognizing something valuable in another. Jasmine studied his face, looking for deception but finding only honesty. Why does this matter so much to you? Logan glanced around the empty lobby, then made a decision. When I was 12, my father was a mid-level manager at a manufacturing company. He discovered they were cutting corners on safety equipment to boost profits. He reported it, thinking he was protecting the workers. What happened? He was fired within a week. Blacklisted from the industry. We lost our house, our car, everything. He died when I was 16. Heart attack brought on by the stress of never being able to find decent work again. Jasmine felt her chest tighten. Logan, I'm so sorry. He used to tell me that doing the right thing was its own reward. Logan continued. But I watched him die believing that integrity was just another word for stupidity. It took me years to understand that the system was broken, not him. And that's why you built all this. Jasmine gestured at the gleaming lobby around them. I built Rostec to prove that good business and good ethics aren't mutually exclusive, Logan said. But I needed someone who understood the real cost of moral courage. Someone who'd paid that price and still believed it was worth it. Someone like your father. Someone like you. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Seattle's bustling streets through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Finally, Jasmine spoke. So what happens now? Logan smiled. Not the polished CEO smile she'd seen on stage, but the warm, genuine expression she remembered from that cold night at the bus stop. Now we change the world, one ethical choice at a time. You ready for that kind of responsibility? Jasmine thought about the women back at Mercy House, still fighting for their second chances. She thought about all the employees across the country who were facing the same impossible choice she'd faced, integrity or security. She thought about Logan's father, who died believing that goodness was weakness. I've been ready my whole life, she said. I just needed someone to believe it was possible. 6 months later, Project Shelter Code had expanded to 30 cities and helped over 800 displaced ethical employees rebuild their lives. Jasmine kept a photo on her desk, not of her family, but of the women from Mercy House who'd graduated from her program and found stable jobs. And sometimes, late at night when she was working late in her new office, she'd think about that stranger on the bus who'd offered half his sandwich to someone who had nothing left to give. Sometimes the most ordinary moments change everything. Sometimes kindness really can save the world.